Welcome back to the Female Dating Strategy Podcast, the meanest female-only podcast on the internet. I am your guest host, Savannah.
I'm Diana.
And I'm your guest host, Patricia.
And today, we all thought that we would do an episode on grief, because for those who are unaware, I became a member of the Dead Dads Club in December 2024. And I think I'm the last of the hosts of the four of us to join the awful club that nobody ever wants to be in.
A dubious honor.
Yeah, so we thought we would do an episode on grief in terms of, grief illiteracy, so the way we respond to grief and the way society responds to grieving people, and also what this means for our relationships, particularly our relationships with men. And I think what's quite interesting on this podcast is that we all have quite unique and different relationships with our dads. And I think that has meant that we have also navigated grief and the bereavement process in really different ways.
Yeah, I think our relationships with our dads, as our relationship with our moms, is one of the most defining relationships we have. Like, I know for me, it made a lot of who I am in good ways and in bad ways. But I really connected with doing an episode on this when you suggested it, Savannah, because I do feel that most people, they are suffering from grief illiteracy. And indeed, I think the terminology of a club, even though it's weird, but there's something like reminiscent of the truth about it, because it seems like people, when they do experience loss, their terminology, their ability to understand what it is, and their perspective on life changes in a way that you won't wish on anybody. But when you speak to people after experiencing loss, it is really, really clear who, uses words, intonations, and, intentions that touch you even a little bit and who doesn't. And it doesn't mean that they are doing that for lack of trying. Like, a lot of people would just say, "Do you want a hug?" And it's very stupid, but they just don't know what to say. They just don't know.
Yeah. I think back to before my dad passed away, when Patricia put together some really good points before we started recording about grief. And I was really grief illiterate because I haven't experienced the loss that close to me. So my paternal grandparents, they passed away before I was born. My mum's father passed away. She wasn't close to her dad. And I think I maybe met him like once in my entire life when I was a toddler before he passed away. So I hadn't experienced like your grandparents dying or your great grandparents dying or even an uncle dying until my dad passed away. And it really put into perspective that I was extremely grief illiterate. Like, I know a handful of people in my social circle, like friends or acquaintances, who'd lost their dad. And I think it's just impossible to even begin to fathom like the loss involved in that. Because like logically, right, that technically speaking, if everything goes to plan in life, in quotation marks, that you will live longer than your parents, right? That's the way it should be, in quotation marks. A parent shouldn't be burying you, you should be burying them. But that doesn't take the sting out of losing them, especially if you like your parents as well. So I always caveat, because I remember shortly after my dad passed away, I was on a grief forum and someone else said like, "Oh, when my dad died, that was the best day of my life." And I remember thinking, I've got such an opposite experience because it's like the worst day of my life. But it's interesting how different people process the death of their parents.
I think that the age that it happens to really affects it as well. Because like at the time when my father passed away, I was like in my teens.
Oh my gosh.
And so I was like the only person in my age group who had ever had an experience like that. And like I had to like grow up overnight. I've always felt really different to my peers, like in general. But like because of that experience, I felt even more different. Like, I always felt different for other reasons, like just the way I approached dating, just the way I approached my career. Like I felt like there were lots of aspects of me that just made me feel like an outsider. But in that one specifically, I was like, okay, this is a club I don't want to belong to because this is a space where no one can relate to me. And like, people always think that they're saying like the nice thing, like, or, I even had people coming and saying like, "Oh, you'll get over it one day." And I'm like, you know what? When your mom dies, I'll remember to say that to you. When your parent passes away, I'll remember to say that back. And like, I was like, you can't even think about how awful that would be to say that to someone and be like, "You'll get over it," Like that's something you say to like someone when they have a cold, not something you say to someone when they've lost like a really important member of their family. But that's the thing, like at the time when it happened, and the reason why it's so appalling that happened is because everyone around me was like kind of a kid or like in their early 20s too. Like they lack the maturity to be able to have that discussion. It's like we're at an age now where we're much older. But like when it happens to you when you're really young, it's like unless you have good adults around you who are willing to actually speak to you in a certain kind of way. And of course, there's like generational differences, right? Like generationally, people don't know how to talk to you. I also think like coming from a culture that was colonized affects it because so many of our relatives and elders like went through, lots of death in general, like losing their parents, losing their relatives. So it's like they process death very differently from you. So it's just like, part of coming from a colonized culture, part of like coming from a different generation, like when you're that young, you just process it very differently from like when you're a little bit older. I definitely think age is also changes the way you experience grief a lot.
Definitely. And that sounds like such a lonely experience. I had chills up to the tippy top of my head when you said that very hurtful sentence of you're going to get over it. And I think it's such a blatant example of these kinds of sentences because that teenage person who told that to you, he was trying in a very, very twisted way to console you in this like incomprehensible gap between your experience that he cannot fathom and what he was trying to say. And this is the paradox about it because you don't wish on anybody to be part of this dubious club. You don't wish on anybody to experience this terrible pain.
Yeah, and you dissociate as well. Like, I mean, when the body and stuff was there, like there was this like relative or someone that came up to me. And obviously, sometimes you put on a lot of weight from the grief and stuff, like you eat differently, your body changes and stuff. And I'd put on some weight. And he was like, yeah, maybe now is the time you think about like getting back to the gym and like losing weight and stuff. And like my father's body was like right there. And I remember laughing because I was just like, it was like so random. Like I didn't know how to respond except to laugh. And people thought I'd gone insane, right? Because I hadn't cried like the entire funeral or anything. Like I went like totally numb because I couldn't like process the shock of losing my dad. So I wasn't crying at all. But then when he said that, like in my mind, I was like, what possessed you? And it made me laugh so hard. Like he didn't mean to be funny, but they all thought like I was like, I'd gone insane, right? Because I was like laughing so hard at this guy. And I was laughing a lot. So people thought, oh yeah, she's lost it. But I think it was also just because I was like, I don't feel safe around these strangers. Like as a kid, like these are adults I don't feel safe around, like being so vulnerable. Like I waited until I went back to college and like that was when I allowed myself to cry.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's so different. It depends. It's like, it's never an easy topic to discuss anyway. But like, I think partially because I was so young when it happened, like most of my life now at this point has been actually maybe a third of my life has been now without my dad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
And to be honest, that's something that we don't really acknowledge because if you look at averages, right, a lot of people, they start to lose their parents maybe in their 40s, 50s, sometimes 60s. So losing your dad as a teenager in your 20s and 30s is really young to lose a parent. And, I suppose in a way you'll always be too young to lose your parents. I think even if my dad lived to 100 and I was in my 70s or late 60s, I would still say he went too soon. But if you're bereaved as a teenager or in your 20s and 30s, statistically, that is, that's a young age to lose a parent, someone as impactful as a parent in your life as well. And I think also with grief, it's that the cultural difference is absolutely massive, I think, as well. I am of Nigerian heritage. We're brought up in the UK. And, after my dad's passing, we started to see just the differences in the way they approach grief. So in Nigeria, when someone passes away, it can almost feel like a celebration of life. That's how they see it. So funerals are very, almost like a party. They're more of a celebration than a mournful event. And I remember my siblings and I were saying, well, we're not in the mood to celebrate. Like, we've just lost our dad. He was only 65. I'm not in the mood to celebrate anything at this point, at least, whilst it's still raw. And I remember a couple of people who came to my dad's funeral because we buried him in the UK and they were like, oh, the funeral, it wasn't how we expected. We expected it to be happier. And I was like, fuck off. Like, first of all, like funerals in the UK are fucking expensive. They are so expensive. You basically get scammed in life and scammed in death, number one. And number two, it's really inappropriate to say to a grieving family, like how you think that they should have, put on a funeral for their loved one. It's deeply inappropriate. But it's also that cultural difference because if we had done the funeral in Nigeria, it would have looked very, very different. I'm not sure if I would have preferred it either.
That's so interesting. I mean, I was exposed to it a little bit through Dia de Muertos and how, I don't know if you know this Mexican holiday.
Yeah, Dia de los Muertos.
Yeah, fortunate to have a very good Mexican friend. And shortly after my dad passed away a few years ago, she introduced me to this holiday. And that was so transformative for me because it's a way to experience death in a totally different context. I won't elaborate on the holiday like probably people who know it do. But what I mean to say, connecting to what you're saying, Savannah, and also to you, Diana, that it's very dependent on context. And also there's a generational thing there. My parents came from the USSR, so I think they're tougher generally. And part of what made my dad who he is that he went through a lot of really, really disturbing shit in his childhood. But this is the thing. My dad was always really emotional when it was somebody's death day. So he was like, today is the day that so and so died. And usually he would drive me places. So he would be telling me, and I'm sitting in the car looking at him. I'm like, okay, Dad. You know, I didn't know what to do with this information. It looked to me like, why are you so sad? Because this is the day of somebody's death. And it's just so ironic that he's the first person that I lost. And now I really, really feel it, like, you know, on the day of his passing or on his birthday, because he would get so sad. Today is so and so's birthday. She would have been this and this much years today. And like, I remember the first year after my dad died, I was actually on a trip in Thailand and I got a notification on my phone and I saw my dad's picture. I almost fell out of bed. It was like a morning and it was Facebook notifying me that today is would have been my dad's 80th birthday. I was like, fuck, I was distraught. Felt like, I don't know, the universe came and slapped me like on the face. Like, it was just, I felt it in that moment. And this ties incredibly well to grief illiteracy because his sad face for all of those people that he knew and loved on their birthday and how old they would have been, I never got why he was sad about that. And yeah, you don't know it till you know it. Unfortunately, you wish you wouldn't know it. But yeah, I can't even imagine like how it is to lose your dad at such a young age, like in your teens.
I mean, there are like huge periods of my early 20s and late teens. Like, I have no recollection of what happened at all. Like, I don't remember that period of my life really well. Like, it's like a big black spot now. And like, that's just the way sometimes grief works. You know, you just don't have memories around those things. Like, I straight up don't remember some of those things at all. Like, totally, completely blank. No idea what happened. And like, I remember I was back for like 10 days because I was living in another country at that point. And I was like, okay, I'm back for a little bit. And I don't remember the whole period at all because I was like dissociating so badly. Like, all of these really positive memories were actually flooding for me. It wasn't like I wasn't in a miserable state like during the funeral. I was just remembering like this really funny incident that like happened with my dad, like where we got into a fight. It was like about my driver's license or something. Like, I needed a car to go to my driver's class and like he forgot about it. And I remember like he was getting like a massage or something, okay? And like I was like stomping my feet. I was so angry with him because he didn't give me the car keys or whatever. And like his masseuse was deaf, okay? And like this guy, he turns to my dad and he's like, she's very angry, isn't she? And my dad was like, look at you. You're so loud, even the deaf can hear you. And I don't know why that like, that thought popped into my mind when I was at the funeral. And I started laughing so hard, like in the middle of the funeral, okay? Because I just had this, like, I was just getting flooded with all these really funny, positive memories about him.
That sounds like an iconic moment. And also when you were telling about the other incident when you were laughing, like there's something so absurd about death. Like the finality of it. There was a person, he was a huge part of your life, and they're just gone. They don't exist anymore. That's so fucking weird. I think like if you don't have the mental steps to reach up there and understand what that means, I think like the absurdity really does invite laughter in a way, like a nihilistic approach.
Yeah. There's such a final tone.
I think for me, I can accept it as an event, like, oh, that person died or that person's passed away. But it's just the finality of it. Like, I remember at my dad's funeral, after we had done the committal, so they'd lowered him into the ground. And my siblings and I were just sort of like stood around thinking, are we just going to leave him there? Like, is that it? Like, is that it? Like, are we just going to leave him there? Because you just can't really wrap your head around that. And it's like, yeah, we're going to leave him there. And that's where he's going to stay forever. Like, he's not coming back. So yeah, I completely get that.
I mean, like that's what you remember of them. I think you don't remember them like the way they were when they were weak and stuff. You remember them when they were in their prime of health. And like my dad was a very funny guy. And like, those were the memories that I was left with when he passed. And like, that's the thing. I mean, of course, like there were moments I think, later on where like moments of grief of things like that I remember that I was like, and you always get hit with that, right? When you realize, oh, he might not be there for your wedding, or when you see like little girls with their fathers and stuff. I was like, yeah, this is hard. It's not easy to face that and to see that and to see like my friends get married and like their dads are around and stuff. And it's.
And I remember my therapist, she said something because like she lost her dad like I think 5 days before mine. So we're sort of going through the grieving together in quite similar circumstances as well. And the way she put it, she was like, it's like your dad is everywhere, but he's nowhere at the same time. And I find that just that particular framing of death, it's actually been quite helpful because in the sense that my dad is everywhere and in the sense that like he's in my mind, he's in my heart, he's in, I guess, my DNA, he's even in my flat because he helped me out with my deposit. All my intellectual interests in life like come from my dad, but at the same time, it also feels like he's just not there, And I think that is it oxymoron? Is that the term? A weird juxtaposition / oxymoron. But yeah, it's just something that's also remained with me, like that they're everywhere, but they're nowhere at the same time.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to put it. Indeed, it's an oxymoron. I think that's a very, very consoling way to look at it. It also is reminding me of how my brother spoke of the tombstone. Like, it's not where he is, it's just marking something. And I'll, of course, very much relate to what you're saying, Savannah, that my father embedded his values into me and he pushed me to be who I am. And also I'm made of his, I'm made of his flesh. So yeah, I think that's a very, very deep way to look at it. Like all encompassing, but also not at all. Because you just wish you could call him up or see his face. You can't. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is why when people say, oh, he's in a better place now, like, again, I give people grace because the people who say that often haven't usually lost someone close. I give people grace, but it also misses the point of why I'm sad. And the way I put it is, let's say my dad was on a cruise in the Caribbean, right? On the best cruise ship, on, let's say, the Icon of the Seas, right? If he was on a month-long cruise, right? And I said, I really miss my dad, right? People would understand what I'm talking about. They wouldn't say, oh yeah, but he's on a cruise, like he's having the time of his life. But, when I say I miss my dad, it's more, I miss the fact that he isn't with me. The fact that he's in a better place, that's all well and good. And I'm happy for him. But at the same time, it's like, I want him here, with me.
Absolutely.
And it's the absence that I'm missing. And the possibility of him being in paradise or in a better place or in like heaven, it doesn't take away from that absence.
No, it doesn't. And ultimately, I think for you, it's very fresh, Savannah. But in my experience, ultimately, after the grieving process is, come to some kind of, at some point, most of what remains is just the longing, the missing the person, just wishing you could talk to him, just wishing, you just miss them. In happy moments and sad moments, in moments where you would have called them, they're just not there and you miss them. That's the deepest, that's the reality of it. And I guess this is where I'm going to go in with my rabbi spiel that, dear listener, what we're trying to convey is that the gravity of grief is so deep. It's like deeper than the Grand Canyon. And if you haven't experienced it, we're happy for you. We're glad that you didn't get to experience that. Life is finite. We will probably all experience it at some point or another, or maybe, I don't know, I don't want to say something very morbid, but like the only way to not experience it is to go away and leave everybody that you love behind grieving for you, right? So basically what I'm trying to say is talking about grief, talking about death, old age, sickness is not easy. It's not something that is easy. It's not a kind of light subject that can be glossed over or talked about in a light way. And a part of the reason why we're not good at talking about it, I think, is that it's also not portrayed in media very much because it's depressing. Like maybe today, in today's media environment, maybe there are some things that touch it. But if I'm thinking about the TV that I used to, or the movies that I used to watch growing up, it was absent from there. There is no like guide to how to talk about it. So that's why people say stupid things. They don't understand and they don't have a manual. What I can say is just try to be there for a second. Like, don't try to make the person feel better. Because what are these sentences? You'll get over it. My God, that's awful. Or he's in a better place. Or I heard a lot of be strong. Like, all of this is trying to make other person feel better. I have another suggestion. How about don't try to make him feel better, because he won't. Don't try to change the reality for him or paint it in brighter colors, because you know what? The person who's experiencing the loss is the first person who would have loved to change it if he could. Like, he would have loved to, reverse the news. He would have loved to make his mom that's sick with dementia not sick, right? He would love to get the call dad is dead in the hospital and hang up and have it all like reversed and not happen. But they can't. That's the thing. That's what we're trying to convey. Like, the gravity of this situation, of this aspect of life is so fucking real. So the best thing that you can do, dear listener, if you want to develop grief literacy, is to be there with the person who's experiencing this shit. Like, they're sitting in the shit. Just sit with them in the shit for 1 second. Just try to feel 0.5% of what they're feeling. Just be there with them for one moment. And then when you feel it, you can say, this is so terrible. This sucks. This is awful. This is just shit. And then you're connecting, because then they're not alone. For that 1 second that you're there with them, that's one moment that they're not there alone.
I completely agree, Patricia. And off the back of what you said, I think that when you were touching on the way in which people can sometimes come out with stuff to make themselves feel better because they don't know what to say, in terms of people trying to comfort the grieving person, I think, when we talk about behaving in a high value way, one of the ways in which I think a high value person behaves is authenticity. And one of that is, if you feel bad, then you feel bad. You don't stuff down your feelings, you acknowledge them and you behave accordingly. You don't pretend to be okay. You don't push through it. And even though there isn't as good as support system as there should be for grieving people, but I think one of the things that my dad's, passing has taught me, especially because you realize that life is really short, right? And, we're only on this planet for a finite period of time. It's okay to ask for what you need. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to wallow. And I say this all the time in the context of a relationship ending. I think there's also an implicit pressure, especially on women, to be like, yeah, fuck that low value scrote. He ain't shit. I'm moving on. When actually, I think some of the best growth and development can come from sometimes wallowing in your misery. And it's a bit different in the grieving process. But, when I used to go through breakups and I used to mourn the end of a relationship, I would often say, okay, I'll give myself a week to just feel absolutely shit. I'll cry, I'll eat ice cream. I will, basically set up a dartboard with his picture on it and throw darts at it until my thumbs are numb or whatever, right? To help me feel sorry for myself. And I think it's really, really important to process that feeling, to feel whatever you want to feel. And going back to grieving, it can be sometimes, just like bursting into tears in the shopping mall, right? I've sort of like made a deal with myself. If I want to cry over my dad, then I'll just do it. It doesn't matter if I'm at work, if I'm in the gym, if I'm at the shopping center, if I'm driving my car, if I'm at home, just do it. Like, just because it's a release as well. And, when you're dealing with something this profound, you can't escape it. You have to go through it. There's just absolutely no way to escape it. Even if you were to resort to things like even alcohol or drugs, that's a very, 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 very temporary fix, because it's just so encompassing and it's so overwhelming. And every single part of your life is going to be impacted. And again, I said this to Patricia on the bonus content, but, death is more of a certainty for everyone than giving birth, right? And even though I don't think that maternal care is where it should be, but if we think about it, though, not everybody will give birth to a child, but everybody's going to die. But where is the frank discussions around grief? Where's the frank discussions around the actual bereavement process? and what that looks like. Because for me, I'm not really sure if it's a process. I think for me, it's a state that I will probably always be in, even though I'm past the anger and denial stage. But it's just that constant, just like Patricia said, that underlying sadness and the longing for my dad that is just never going to go away.
It's very fresh. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge the first and major part of what you were saying, because I could not agree more. It is so, so important generally to feel what we feel, because the only way out is through. And, that which doesn't bend breaks. And I so full-heartedly believe in what you're saying. And I'm so, I don't know if happy is the right word, but I'm even proud of hearing you say that you allowed yourself and you made a deal with yourself that you're going to give yourself the ability to feel what you feel and not to shove it in or resist it. And I think that's so fucking valuable and so not for granted.
I think sometimes grief can bring up really ugly feelings too, though. Like, I think that a lot of people don't acknowledge that for the grieving person, sometimes there can be like some guilt. Like, I know for a fact that, when I lost my dad, I was like in the thick of college and I was so preoccupied with school that like I would keep like dodging opportunities to like be on calls with him. And like, he'd be like, oh yeah, get on a call, like, let's talk. And I would always be like, no, I'm too busy. I have school. I have this, I have that. And like, then obviously suddenly, I think we had a chat like the day he passed away. I don't know if I called him that day. I don't think I called him. I think it was just like we were exchanging messages, like text messages. And I hadn't heard from him. And like, I remember feeling a lot of guilt, just being like, why didn't I call him more? Like, there were so many chances. Like, there were so many times where he tried to call me and I was just always too busy for him. And like, it brings up a lot of like latent, like not just grief, but like anger at yourself. Cause you have like those stages of grief, right? And like, you just feel so angry at yourself for like, oh, why wasn't I more present? Why wasn't I more available? Like, why didn't I, do more? Especially if like you were separated from your parent, like I was, because I was at university at the time. Again, because it's so uncomfortable for other people to like be around you. Like, I felt even more isolated because I was in college, and like, college in the States at that time, everyone wants to have fun. They want to go party. They want to drink. Like, they don't want to be around this like sad girl with like the dead dad and stuff. It's just like such morose energy for them. And they don't mean to be that way because again, they're young and immature and like they're just drinking and having fun. But like, I felt even more isolated from my peers because I felt like they just almost didn't want me around. And I think it's really important if you do have someone who's grieving in your life to like make sure that they feel included and that they're still part of like your group or whatever, because it's so easy to self-isolate when you're in that process anyway. You have this natural instinct maybe to cut yourself off from other people because you're like, oh, like no one can get me, like no one can understand me. But I think it's like, whatever that person has that feels normal, like you're a part of that. You're a part of that. And I think that if you don't feel that kind of responsibility towards your friend or your family member to be like, you're still a part of us, like we still want you around, like you can be the Eeyore of the group. You don't have to be at like 100% happy. Like you're not supposed to be, but like you're still a part of us and you're still welcome and included. Like that would have been so life-changing for me because that was not what I got. What I got was a lot of isolation. I mean, I can't even blame other people for it because some of it was self-inflicted. But I think some of it was also just like, I could tell people were uncomfortable around me because they just didn't know how to talk to me. So they're like, let's just like not invite her because we want to drink and we want to have fun. Like maybe she'll get drunk and start crying. And like never in my life have I been like a get drunk and call my ex and cry kind of person. Like I'm a very happy drunk. So I was just like, I felt like I was being punished for experiencing this really bad thing. And so I like that particular semester, I remember I just like stayed by myself in my dorm all day and just studied. I had like the best grades I ever had that year because nobody wanted to hang out with me. And I felt so much guilt and so much anger because I was like, why didn't I call my dad more? I spent all this time like studying, instead of like calling my dad.
Wow. I'm really sorry you had to go through that.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the thing. I don't think people think about these things. Like I was talking to Savannah about this on a call that we had once where I was like, when you're grieving, people are more concerned with how it makes them feel, not how it makes you feel. They're more concerned with how uncomfortable it makes them feel. Like, it's like, oh, I didn't reach out. Like we had very similar experiences with like a guy friend who like didn't speak to me for a month. And he was like, well, I didn't reach out initially because I wanted to give you space. But then the longer I gave you space, I was like, oh, now it's like just, maybe it's not right to reach out to you because now it just feels like it's too late. And so I just didn't reach out to you. And I was like, so you would rather risk like our friendship dying entirely than make some kind of attempt to let me know that you gave a shit about me. I mean, of course, we're not friends anymore, like, because that guy is an idiot. And he's also a huge Trumper now, so I'm not upset about that. But at that time, I was like, you would rather let this friendship die. I think that was when I first started realizing men are not your friends.
And again, I don't wish anybody to join the Dead Parent Club because it is awful. But, when the Diana's experience has happened to me, I say, well, I was once ignorant too. And, one day you'll know what it feels like. And it's not going to be nice.
Oh, yeah, it's not. It's not. You see a lot of popular media talk about like, oh, the last moments you had with your dad and like, like recollecting that. And some people have really bad last minutes, like I think that's kind of informed how I interact with people now, where I'm like, if you really love this person, like don't stay in a strop with them, like try to resolve conflicts with them when you can, because it's so important that you end things on a good note. Like thankfully when my father and I, when he passed away, like we were on very good terms. There was like nothing between, like no fight or anything, but I still felt bad. I still felt bad that I didn't reach out to him more. But it's so funny that like this conversation made me pull up, like I saved the last WhatsApp chat that I had with my dad from 13 years ago. And this is the first time I pulled it out in 13 years. I like to keep it around because the last thing we ever said to each other was like, I said to him, I work this hard because I just want you to be proud of me. And he's like, I've always been proud of you,
regardless of what you do.
Oh.
So that was the last message I ever got from him. I've always been proud of you. You don't need to bend your back over to make me proud.
That's so supportive.
Oh, that's so sweet. And that's such a good thing, like, to hold on to, because it was similar with my dad. When the last time I had a conversation with him before the end stage delirium set in was that I told him, like, Dad, I want to pursue in law. Like, I want to pursue a career in law. And I remember he just said, like, with almost like that proud parent smile, he was like, oh, my daughter's going to become a lawyer. And he just looked so, so proud. And I 100% believe that he believed I could do it, because he was always just that sort of, dad. He championed us all. Sometimes like borderline, like delusional, like, Delulu's a Salulu. But if I said I wanted to be like the president of Nigeria, like my dad would have 100% have absolutely backed me and believed in me. And I think having that self-belief from a man, because a lot of men, they sort of the opposite. If they know you're ambitious, they will try and take you down 1,000 pegs. My dad was the complete opposite. Like he would always be like, basically you can do whatever you want to do. You can be whatever you want to be. And I will always support you and genuinely believe in you. And I know that when he said that my daughter's going to be a lawyer, like he absolutely believed it. And he was really proud. He was proud of me anyway, but he was just, like he really bought into my ambition when I told him that this is what I want to do.
That's the beauty, hey? That unwavering support that is regardless of what you do or don't do.
And from what I hear of your dad, like he was such a funny guy as well. Like I still remember this episode where you talked about like how he was talking about like these men who was like split 50-50 or something or whatever. And he's like, oh, they have a mental illness or something. I don't remember.
He said that about like men who go after like the women much younger than them. And he just said it like, because like my dad, like English wasn't his first language. So like when he wanted to say something with impact, he would default to Yoruba, which was his first language. And I remember me and my older sister were just sitting there and he was like, he just said in Yoruba, oh my God, like these men who go after much younger women are just mentally ill. And it was so strange because my dad was really popular with younger women. Like when he was in hospital, I remember I went to go and visit him on my birthday and it was outside visiting hours. And usually in hospitals, they're really funny with you if you go outside visiting hours or they'll just turn you away. So I went and then the lady was like, our visiting hour starts at 1, and I got there at 12:30 and I'm like, okay, I'm really sorry. And then when I said, oh, I'm here to see my dad, I said his name. She then started like grinning and then she just let me straight through. And then my dad was like surrounded by this gaggle of nurses. He was like, oh, oh my gosh, you're Mr. like Savannah's dad. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? And then, so my dad, I mean, he wasn't like, entertained, like lapping up the attention, but he had all these like, these like young nurses saying like, oh, he's my favorite patient. There was one nurse, she said, like, anytime I see on the patient list in the morning when I come on shift that I'm looking after your dad, I literally do a twirl in delight because he's my favorite patient. And they just absolutely loved him.
Oh my God, this is so strange because this is like exactly like my dad. Like I remember like when my dad was hospitalized, like also I think this is like one of the few green flags I have about men of that age group. If they get along with women of all ages and all women are like drawn to them, like they like them, there's something about them. Like because my dad, he like befriended and had genuine, sincere like connections with women of all ages. Like they all trusted him. Older women, younger women, like grandmother's age, little children, like everybody was drawn to him and he went out of his way to help women. He went out of his way to help women like get their financial lives in order. Like he did everything he could to support women in his life. And when he was hospitalized, I remember his best friend made a joke to me and he was like, oh, you know what? On some level, I think he likes being hospitalized because he's got all these pretty nurses catering to him all day.
I said to my dad as well.
That's all. He likes to be surrounded by all these women. And like all the nurses loved him too. And like, and I remember telling my dad, I was like, you never want to get out. Like you're just surrounded by these women.
I mean, I don't know what your dad like, physically. But, when I hear stories about Diana's dad and, my dad, it just goes to show that when, men say, oh, women like the 666 and you have to be like a bodybuilder and you have to be on six figures. I'm like, my dad he was tall, but that was it. He was a complete opposite. And it wasn't about the way he looked or how much money he had or, like the Andrew Tate vibes he gave off. He wasn't like an alpha male, super alpha. He was just a decent person. And it seems like that's an anomaly. If, nurses for Diana and my dad are literally doing backflips when they get to look after them. I mean, to me, that was just my dad. He wasn't like a saint or anything like that. But it just goes to show like just how much the bar has fallen in terms of these men. And I think that I was saying to my best friend as well, I think that, such men are unfortunately a dying breed. I don't think they manufacture men like that.
Yeah, and such men, I think, are like, there's such positive impacts on some of the men around them too. Because like my dad, when he had, we had like a driver in his old company. Like my dad owned his own business, and so he had like a guy who would chauffeur him from like work and back. And this guy had 2 daughters, and like he was like very disappointed about it because obviously, I come from like a South Asian background. They value sons a lot more, and so nobody's that excited to have girls. And like everyone always gave my dad shit about having like just one girl because they were like, "Wouldn't you want a son to carry on your line?" And he's like, "I'm just gonna say that my daughters were 10 of your sons." So
wow, absolute boss.
I don't really give a shit about your sons. My dad was like the oldest cousin of all of like his clan. So he was the one who was responsible for babysitting all of the other kids. And he told me straight up, he was like, the only man that wants a son is the one that's never had to raise one. Because he was like, I had to look after those boys and all I ever did was try to keep them alive because they would get into situations that they were never supposed to. And then I'm like, oh my God, if this guy dies on my watch, it's going to be my fault. And so I was like, please, God, make sure that I don't have a son. And he was like, begging to have a daughter. He was like praying every day. He was like, oh my God. He was on a business trip when I was born. And when he got the call that my mom went into labor because I was born earlier, he was like, immediately, he's like, I went to the first place I could find. Like, there were no temples there. He's like, I went to the first place of worship I could find. And I was like, God, Jesus, whoever's listening out here, just make sure it's a girl, okay? Just make sure it's a... He was that determined. He was like, I don't fucking want a son. The son is of no use to me. Your son is a ginormous liability. No thanks. And very, very keen on having a girl and just like, grew up in a household where the women were very taken care of as well. Like, when they would start, like, obviously, because, women sync up on their periods and stuff, like when they would get their periods and stuff, the men did all the labor because they're like, well, the women can't do anything. They don't want to do anything. So we do everything. I remember he's like, when my dad got married to my mom, he was like, I just thought that, like, in our culture, women are not supposed to work on their periods. So, like, I just thought that was a thing everywhere. I didn't realize that was just my household.
Aww.
So he was like, when my mom was on her period, he was like, yeah, you're not supposed to work. And he would do everything. And he was like, I didn't know until I got married to your mom that that's not a thing. Because I grew up with that. I was expected to do all the household labor, like go to work, come back. And like, I was told what my tasks would be because it was like a big family. And he's like, and I had to babysit this person, or I had to wash that dish, or I had to do this. So there was no like notion of, that's not his job. But when he got older and he was able to afford it, he was like, you know what, I'm going to hire people to do this so that my wife has more free time. Like, again, looking out for his wife, looking out for his family. And like when he met my driver is like, I'm very upset that because I have 2 daughters. And he's like, now I have to worry about getting them married. Like, I don't want to invest in their education. And he's like, what if, radical thought, what if I invest in your daughter's education so you don't have to worry about that? And then you don't try to get them married and like let them make their own choices. And my driver is like, great thought experiment. Let's do that. and he actually got them educated. Both of them are doctors now. And he's like, I would have never done that if your dad hadn't pushed me.
Aww.
That's an amazing story.
Amazing dad.
Like, I really had to have that mindset shift because I really didn't think they were worth much. Like, and he said this to me very casually, and I was like, that's not nice. And he was like, no, really. Like, until he told me that this is a possibility, I'd never registered it because no man around me would have done it. But because he took that financial burden off my plate and he educated them, and I didn't have to worry about that, like, they're thriving now, So I've like through my life, I've had a lot of women come up to me and be like, I went to college because of your dad. I bought my first house because of your dad. I had all these like life experiences because of your dad. Like, again, that's the standard I was accustomed to. So as you can imagine, I'm desperately single.
Yeah, and it becomes really, really hard. Like, I remember I saw on X, I hate that site, but there was a tweet going around about, those like the Manosphere X type places, and it said something like, oh, make sure you date a woman who has a good relationship with her dad. And I thought, well, actually, if a woman has a good relationship with her dad, she would most likely avoid the Manosphere types because her dad will set such a high standard of behavior and she won't settle for less. Like, my dad is a big reason why I'm happy to be child free, because I think he was one of those men that who were actually happy to be a father and a dad. I feel like a lot of like men, they like the idea of being a dad, like the fun dad who just picks up the kids as and when they feel like it. They're in the photo ops, but they don't actually do like the child rearing. But, you know, when I asked my dad, like, you know, what was the happiest, you know, time of your life? He would always say, you know, when the four of you were really, 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 really small, because he really, really enjoyed being that parent. And I saw that, you know, when that he was with his granddaughter, that he just really, really loved being around small children and, you know, taking care of them. And he used to work 2 shifts. He used to work 2 jobs because that's what you did as an immigrant in 1980s and 1990s Britain to make ends meet. An active father, it was so easy to make the excuse of, oh, I'm tired, because he literally worked 2 jobs, but he would still come home and be an active father to all of us. And again, I just don't think they breed men like that anymore. And he was never like, we go 50-50 with my mum, or I'm not taking the kids to school because I did it last week. Like, he did it all. Like, all my teachers, even the dentist where I got my teeth straightened as a teenager, when I went back in 2023 to get them straightened again, I remember the first thing the receptionist asked me was like, oh, how's your dad? And I was like, how do you know my dad? And then she was like, well, he used to come and, you know, take you to all your appointments. And this was, what, 13 years? About 13, 14 years. And she still remembered him because he would always take me to my orthodontist appointments. And he was just that active and involved. And I just feel like if a man is not willing to do that, at least, then he's not worth having a kid with. And I know such men exist. You know, I'd like to believe that there are men out there like, you know, my dad, like Diana's dad, but it makes it a lot easier to not settle for a guy who isn't willing to do all of that or is not that committed, in my experience.
And I think that that's the thing, right? Those kinds of men, they bring more joy, that you can weather storms with them because they have that attitude. Like, my dad used to take me to my dentist appointments too. I also think it's so sad to think that the part of the reason she probably remembers it is because it doesn't happen that often.
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
She noticed it.
I think it's more than just men aren't manufactured like that anymore. I think it's people aren't manufactured like that anymore. It sounds like both of your dads were really, you know, huge people. Like, my dad was kind of short, but my brother told me he doesn't remember him as small. He remembered him as a big, big person because of his personality and because of everything that he brought to the world. And me and my brother, we both trying to manifest like my dad's legacy in a way. Like, he didn't have a lot of money. He didn't have much, but he was always, always helping people. So many people reached out to me after he was gone, told me how much he helped them. And he was a super authentic person. And similar to what you guys are sharing, like, really left an impression on people because of how authentic and warm he was. And I think that these kinds of values of helping people, of being present, of being loyal. Like, my dad and my mom split up when I was like 17. I wouldn't say they were always friends, but they always had each other backs. Like, you know, one of them had a cold, the other brings a soup. Like, my mom helped my dad with stuff and he, you know, went with her to do the test for the car because she's nervous about it. Like, they were always helping each other, even though they weren't a couple for many, many, many years. And they also immigrated together to a new country, right? So they were each other's family in a broader sense. And I think that taught me a lot about values. And I think that's something that that is something that I take with me. And it is even beyond the context of dating. It is like, to put it in FDS context, it's like the leveling up. It's the part of like, who do I want to be in this world? What kind of values I want to portray? So I'm always trying to help people if I can.
Yeah, I mean, like, my dad was, you know what the thing is, he always feels taller to me because in my brain, I'm still that little kid, you know? So he still feels taller. Like, even though I think that by the end of it, we were probably similar in heights, but he's such an eccentric, bohemian, radical person, like such a like singular, one of a kind sort of human being that leaves an impression because it's just impeccable taste, impeccable style, just impeccable thoughts on things. Like, just so well informed, so curious, and just very few people have that kind of interest. Big reader, like so informed about what's going on in the world, you know? And those kinds of people leave an impression on you, like a fully well-rounded, developed human being. And like, that's the thing when you go on these dates with people and you're like, oh my God, you might as well be an NPC right now. You know, like, how are you like this? You know what I mean? Like, and my dad was very protective about the kind of men he allowed around me. Like, if they were good men, you would hear nothing about them from him. But if they were bad men, oh my God, he wouldn't stop. Like, if you were a good guy, my dad had nothing to say about you. He refused to give men compliments. He's like, they hear enough. He's like, he just didn't believe in it.
And also, he knows what men are like. Like, the first person to tell my sisters and I, that men lie was my dad. He was the first person, like, to say and to tell us, like, the true nature of men. He was the first person to set us on that path. So when these like manosphere types, I'm guessing they're saying that she needs to have a good relationship with her dad so that she can worship me, basically. Like, it's not going to work like that. If a woman has a good father, that is probably one of the best antidotes, in my opinion, to low value men, is if you've got a good dad.
Exactly.
I think they're trying to say that means she's not going to have like severe issues, but if she's not going to have severe issues, she's not going to date.
Why would she choose you, right?
I mean, she means he's not going to have severe issues with like their behavior. Like, they expect her to be submissive, to be subservient to a man.
They're stupid because they think that like your father is grooming you to be a submissive wife to them.
Yes, exactly.
My father was like, men aren't shit. Men aren't shit. You're a goddess, and like they're just merely men. My dad used to say, like, anytime like I was like, oh well, the men don't think, and he was like, and since when does God care about the whims of man? And I was like, okay, I'll move on. No questions asked. Because my dad, that's the pedestal he put me on. He treated me like I was a divine being. He's like, to me, you're like a blessing from like God. I'm not going to make you ever think that you're like beneath men. With the tone of disdain as well. And like, he took so much pride in being a provider, like, even now I always tell people, like, my dad provides for me beyond the grave. Like, a couple of years ago when I moved back, I had like no money left. And I told my mom, like, my laptop was like completely crashed. And obviously I need my laptop for my work. And like, my mom was like, well, he put this bond when you were born that just matured like the year you turned 30. And it was the exact amount I needed for my computer.
Oh,
that's pretty freaking amazing.
And I was like, wow, like almost like 13 years after he passed, he's still providing for me. Like, it's because of him I own a house now. It's because of him I have no debt now. Like, I remember like that was one of the things he told me consistently. He's like, I'm going to make it so you will never, ever know what it's like to bow your head before a man and ask him for money. You won't ever know what that is.
oh.
And he kept that promise, Again, I'm not used to a man that doesn't keep his promises to me. And that's why I don't settle for men who don't.
Yeah.
Damn.
I don't know that. I don't know that experience, and I don't want to know that experience. Not my struggle, hashtag,
And again, he's one of the best antidotes against low value men, because you've seen the way your dad treats you. You saw the way he treated your mum, and you know that kind of man is possible, that they do exist. They might be, I don't know, there might be a manufacturing error, perhaps from the 1990s onwards. And also, our dads, they also came from cultures where they had every reason to be misogynistic pieces of shit. Like, do you know what I mean? So, like, Nigeria is one of the most misogynistic cultures on earth. And I remember my dad used to get so much shit from his friends because he would come home from work, and my mum, she had like 5 pregnancies in 7 years, really wrecked her body as well. So she was unwell for a lot of our childhood. And my dad would do all the cooking, and he would get shit from his friends from doing that. So like, why are you cooking for your wife? Like, she should be cooking for you. And they stopped talking to him, but that didn't mean that he stopped doing it. He was just that principled, and he never saw it as, well, I'm the man, so I should never cook. He just saw it as, I'm taking care of my family. If he wanted to be misogynistic, if he wanted to cheat, again, it's well known that they call like the Yoruba men, which is a tribe my dad was from, Yoruba demons, because they have second families, they cheat on their wives, they beat their wives as well. Again, like, my dad is probably one of the few people in my parents' like social circle whose partner who didn't cheat on his wife or wasn't beating her up like on the regular. Like, domestic abuse, domestic violence, infidelity is really, really common in Nigerian marriages. And so they had all the excuses in the world. And it also proves to me that if my dad can come from that sort of, context and choose to live the way that he did, then a lot of the depravity that men inflict upon women is also a choice. It's not necessarily innate. They can choose to be better. And my dad always said, like, when he was younger, he was the most patient person you could ever meet. I think in my entire life, I think I maybe saw my dad actually lose his temper maybe twice in my life. He was super patient, but he always said, like, when I was younger, I used to have hot temper. And I think that as he got older, he really, really mellowed out, and he just chose to be different. I think it's a classic example of that these men, even if they are from the most misogynistic, cultures in the world, they can choose to be different. They just choose to uphold patriarchy, and they choose to lean into their misogyny.
Oh my God, that. Like, my dad was orphaned, and I always think about these men who like justify the way they treat women by being like, well, I didn't grow up with a father, so I didn't have like a good role model. But my dad was like pretty much orphaned by the time he was like 19. And he craved family so badly. And I remember he was telling me, he was like, when he used to go on these business trips, like these other men would take it as an excuse to like party and get drunk and shit faced and stuff. And like he worked around like Japan and stuff. And like when they have like those cultures of hotels where like these hostess or whatever, like this really creepy culture of like women who come and perform for you. And he was so uncomfortable with that. And he was like, no, I used to go in on my meeting, stay there for the weekend, then everybody else would stay for the weekend so they could party and like their wives wouldn't know about it. And he was like, you guys can pretend you don't have a family. I got to go and read my daughter a bedtime story. And he would come back in time, like take the earliest flight to come back and read me a bedtime story. And he's like, you understand that like I spent most of my life wondering what it's like to have parents. And then I finally got to be one, and you think I'm going to squander that opportunity?
Oh, no, if it was your average man, they'd see that as an opportunity to be like, oh, well, yeah, it's time to dish out the pain, that had been dished out to me. And then if anyone calls me out on it, I'll just say it's because of my childhood. It's always a choice. It is always a choice.
Yeah, it's about your innate values and indeed the decisions that you make. It's not about the culture that you came from.
I think he thrived being a parent. I think he really wanted that. Like Indian, South Asian family, also very, very misogynistic and also lots of like infidelity and stuff. And he was like, no, I want to be a parent. And like they looked after my mom as well. Like, he used to invest all of her money for her, and he made sure that like she would never have to worry about money either. And he never took any money from her. I remember asking her, I was like, because when this 50-50 stuff started coming up on FDS, I was like, oh, like, did you ever go 50-50? And she started laughing at me. I was like, listen, I'm asking you like seriously. She was like, yeah, go and ask your father if he'd want to split 50-50. Like he'd take that as an insult. You'd be telling him he's not a good dad. That's the equivalent of that, because he takes a lot of pride in looking after his family, and he doesn't need my money. So like her money was her money and his money was their money. And I was like, well, what did you do? Like, what did you bring to the table? And she was like, I think I packed his bags when we would go on holidays. And I was like, that's nice. But like, again, there was no expectation. And that's what I mean. Like you have to be in these environments where like these men actually take pride in being family members. Many men don't.
Even though they benefit from it. But that's probably a separate episode for another rant.
Yeah.
A separate rant for another episode. And I think finally as well, it'll be good to also mention just sometimes the unique ways in which bereavement and loss can affect women. Because I don't know about Patricia and Diana's experiences, but I know that when my dad passed, it was really, really weird, right? So my brother and me were on my dad's next of kin. So if anything happened to my dad, they would call usually my brother, actually, because they called him the day before my dad passed away to let him know that my dad wasn't doing too well in the hospital, and they were getting a bit concerned. They weren't concerned he would die, but they were just concerned about his trajectory. Anyway, but when it came to the call to notify the family that he passed away, it came through to me. And I was a bit like, it's the call that you never want to get. And I was thinking, why the fuck did they call me, not him? But I honestly believe that it was perhaps my dad understanding that the women in the family are going to end up getting things done. And when it came to my dad's funeral and his affairs after he passed, so like his estate administration, it was pretty much me and my sister that did all of it, alongside trying to manage our grief, because the men in our family, like, my dad was the youngest of 4 brothers. Like, none of them came to his funeral. I understand to a point because they're older and they were in their 70s. Some of them had health issues, but not a single one of them showed up to his actual funeral. My brother was pretty much nowhere to be seen in terms of the funeral planning. And it ended up resting pretty much on me and my sister to deal with the estate and to sort the funeral out, on top of trying to manage our own griefs and, deal with our own lives and jobs as well. And, that experience from people I've spoken to isn't unique. I think that women are also expected, as usual, to do a disproportionate amount of, the physical, emotional, mental labor that comes with losing a family member.
I'm sorry that that's how it played out. I have to give like a ton of credit to my brother, who took care of everything, because I was just a mess. He took care of everything.
You're very, very lucky to have had that. Like, your brother is a real one for that.
I'm so lucky for my siblings, I know.
Again, very culturally specific, but like in Hinduism, right? Like all of the religious and spiritual rites are done by the men. And because I was like the only female member of the family, like there were only certain things I was allowed to do. Like I wasn't allowed to go to the area where they cremated him. Like I wasn't really present because we dispersed like the ashes on the Ganges and all that stuff. Like I didn't get to do any of that. So I didn't really get to do any of like the closing rites that you're supposed to normally do. And that's another thing like that they leave you out of, because like I was definitely involved in like the estate planning and stuff, like all of that shit they call me for. But like the actual spiritual aspect of like saying goodbye, like you're a woman, so, no, not for you. To be fair, I don't think that I would have been up to it anyway, but like it's weird that like there was no offer. You know what I mean? Like it's you're not supposed to do it. And I mean there've been a lot of women in India who have like battled against this and been like, well, no, I'm going to reserve the right to like, say goodbye to the deceased and like conduct the rites because it's traditionally like a man's territory and people have pushed back on that. But like that's the thing, like even in death, right? Like so many cultures like isolate women and say, well, because you're a daughter, you're not worthy of mourning your own parent, like which is so weird.
Or they expect women to do all the labor and it's just expected that they carry it. So there's even like cultural differences, like Diana said, in terms of how women are treated once, someone's passed away.
This is part of the reason why I hate religion, because it's an encapsulation of a much darker time when women had even less rights, and it's always misogynistic.
But I mean, like, that's like they'll make you do the stuff that like they don't want to do. So it's like, oh, all the stuff that's spiritually meaningful, like the men get to do. But like, if it's like cooking for like 100 people for the funeral service, like, let's get the women to do that. You know what I mean?
The women to do it. Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean to beat the spiritual part of it, but basically religion is a power structure. But yeah, that's for a different episode, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Look, I mean, to me, it didn't really matter that much because I'm not a religious person. But I can see why to someone who is a religious person, like being able to say goodbye to your parent through like your own, religion is very important. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow. That would have been even more hurtful. Yeah, if you actually want to take part in the spiritual stuff and you can't because of your gender.
And you're kind of told you're not because you're of your gender, So like I wasn't particularly buzzing to cremate my dad. You know what I mean? Like...
No, and I think that's the crux of it. It's that choice is taken away, whether it's the fact that the women have to do all the planning of the estate and the funeral, like me and my sister had to do Birmingham and the caretaking prior to that, to my dad's passing, or if you don't even have the choice as to how you want to be involved. And I think a lot of grief, and I think a ton of, the way in which we process grief, there has to be an element of choice, because ultimately the biggest decision as to whether your loved one lives or dies has been taken out of your hands and you feel massively out of control.
Oh, wow. That's deep, man. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And so whether they freeze you out or freeze you in, I think it's almost two sides of the same rather shitty coin for women.
Yeah. I mean, out of curiosity, in Nigerian culture, do you ever like revisit the grave or something like once a year? Are there like ancestral sort of rites you have to do, like, to honor your ancestors? Is there something like that? Because in India, that's like very much a thing that like, yearly you have to do certain things like to honor the departed's memory and stuff like that.
Yeah. So in terms of visiting the actual grave, there's no customs. You can go as often or as little as you like, but we do like to mark certain like milestones of the departed with like giving food to the poor. So we did that for my dad. So on the 7th day of his passing, we paid for food to be distributed to the poor in Lagos. Then I think on the 40th day of his passing as well. And then every year on the anniversary of his passing, we do the same thing. So my dad used to do the same for his parents on the anniversary of their passing. Then he would do the same thing. So that's what we tend to do.
Yeah, no. So part of the reason I was bringing up, like, do you have like final rites or things that you do, or like, things you can commemorate every year, is like we have very similar things where like instead of 7 days, it's like the 14th day or the 11th day or something. And I think like we go to a temple or a crematorium or something like that. And we feed crows because crows are supposed to represent.
Oh.
So it's like the concept is essentially when someone dies, they take the form of like an animal with a much shorter lifespan in preparation for like the next life that they're going to take. And so they're really hungry when they leave their original body before they get to the next life. So we feed the crows like to honor our ancestors. And so there's always been this like special connection to crows in general, because I feed a lot of like the stray animals in my neighborhood. Like I feed like a lot of dogs and cats. So I have a lot of cat food, and crows really love. And like I've reached like peak Disney princess, where like now the crows eat straight out of my hands, which I've been told is like a very uncommon thing, because crows start trusting you and they start bringing you back trinkets. And so far they haven't brought me anything useful yet. It's just been like bottle caps and stuff. I'm hoping one day they bring me something really valuable. You know what I mean? But like the thought process behind, like anytime I tell my mom, and she's like so shocked that like these crows come to me, and she was like, oh, it must be your dad. And I'm like, what makes you think this is my dad? And she's like, well, he's the only one I know who likes fish that much.
That's so sweet.
And so we're like always convinced that like he's finding us. And I don't know, like I think for people who are grieving, who have lost someone, you have to believe whatever you need to believe in order to believe they're with you. For some people, I think it helps them to think there's like final tone to it. It's like, this is the end and like, that's it. There's nothing more left. And I'm so grateful I got to spend like the finite time that I have on this planet with this person, and that like I got to meet someone who's so awesome. And I think for some of us, like, I like the thought that like we're only separated by life.
Yeah, same. And that's what sustained me, the belief and the hope that I'll see my dad again and all my other loved ones as well. And, they say in physics that energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only transform. And I definitely feel like that's true with death. I know that the physical body can transform ashes to ashes, dust to dust. But I do feel like, their general energy is not something that just, goes away when their brain shuts down. I do think if they left a good legacy, it will transform and it will touch the people that love them and that cherish them. It doesn't just go away.
Yeah. Speaking of that energy, like I think I was telling you this a while ago as well. I was like, there were certain signs that I feel like were coming from my dad, like certain experiences I had that I was like, this is so like my dad coded. This is, he's got a hand in this somehow. And like, it's so funny because my friend can spot it now too. Like I talk to her and I'll tell her about like some experience I had or like some really good opportunity that came my way. And she was like, this has your dad written all over it. Like, she's like, he did this for you, and it's nice to think that there's someone out there who's like protecting you in spirit.
He's looking out for you 100%, 100%. So there endeth our lesson on grief. I think it's something that's good to talk about. And I'm glad that we had this discussion on this podcast, on this platform. But yeah, talk to us. Have you experienced bereavement? And if so, what helped you get through it? Because I do think the more we talk about it, the more hopefully society will become less grief illiterate and more understanding of
pain, of just pain, of human pain. I mean, I think it was so cathartic for us to talk about it even because like I could sense even in our call, like this is a very difficult topic to talk about no matter how much time has passed, It's so heavy no matter what. It never feels light.
No. So yeah, it was a good topic to talk about. But on a slightly lighter note, if you haven't noticed already, we are back on socials.
Yeah, back on socials.
Insta, X.
Obviously communicate with us. Let us know what you thought of the episode. Give us like a shout out, suggestions, whatever you want. We want to hear from our listeners. We want to hear anything that you might think that we want to talk about. Any guests that you recommend. We're so in it. We're in it to win it this year.
And about the guests, we have a awesome roster of guests coming up for you. So if you'd like anyone to be added to that list that we haven't spoken about, then do let us know and we will do our best to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I could sign off with a snarky for all you squirrels out there. But I think that it would be a dishonor to our wonderful fathers who were so much more than that. And so for anyone who has ever, lost a loved one, I just hope that you find peace and comfort in your grief.
Mm-hmm. And for all you dads out there, rest in peace.
All you good dads out there.
Mm-hmm. All you good dads. The scrote dads, we don't care about you.
See you next week, queens.